Welcome along, everyone. You'll see there's a chat feature on the side where Simon and myself have said hello. So if you want to put any messages in there, please do. If you have any questions throughout today, there's a Q&A feature. So drop any questions in there and we'll try and come to them at the end. If there's any short answers, then one of the three of us will try and answer those throughout today's webinar as well. Just to say really that the slides will be sent out afterwards and we'll send out links as well. So don't feel you need to furiously write notes. We will circulate these around afterwards. I can still see a few people coming in. So we'll move on to start now then. Rachel, if you're ready to press record. I think we're now recording, so welcome along everybody. So today's webinar is about succession planning for life after a share offer. We're not going to cover so much about what community shares are. There's lots on the community shares website at communityshares.org.uk, which tells you about community shares. There's plenty online, plenty of examples and case studies we've got on there. We're talking really today more about what happens after you raise share capital. And today's webinar is brought to you as part of the Community Ownership Fund's delivery support partnership that works with a number of infrastructure bodies, including Locality, who Rachel today is from, and Rachel will be helping us run the webinar behind the scenes. Myself, I'm John Dawson from Cooperatives UK. I work at the Community Shares unit here based at Cooperatives UK. And then we have with us today, very fortunate to be joined by Simon from Stretford Public Hall, who has been heavily involved with Stretford Public Hall for a number of years, but has also worked with a number of other societies to help them think through life post-share offer and how to manage member and share capital. So the Community Shares Unit is a partnership of Cooperatives UK, Locality and Plunkett, and we've existed for over a decade to support community organisations with community shares, to raise community shares, to provide guidance, inspiration, information around how to do that. If you are interested in more of what we do, there's plenty online at communityshares.org.uk, including continued support in England through our Booster Fund. So if we just move on to what we're looking to cover today, we're planning to look at areas of succession planning. So what you might think about after community shares, after raising share capital, what happens after you raise that, considering members' interests, and then we'll come on to Simon, and Simon's going to talk us through some of the policies, processes and systems that they use at Stretford, now having run 2 share offers to manage almost 1,000 shareholders that they have there. And there'll be an opportunity for some questions and answers as well. You can see the picture on your screen there is from a share offer in the East Midlands from Colville Can that closed earlier this year. So we've got a few examples of share offers throughout the documents, which just to give you a bit of inspiration of other share offers that have happened and taken place. So we probably all know or are aware that community shares are a great way of raising investment, but as well as raising investment, at the same time, you're also building a following. And you might have broad community support in your community for what you do, but what community shares allows is for those supporters to be active and invested members of your organisation as well. There's been well over £230 million raised in community shares in the last decade, but also with that, it's not just about the money that's raised, that has also created, probably now getting on for more like 200,000 members across the country, which is a huge number of people who have put their own time and money into local community projects. But not only that, they have become members of those organisations. So effectively like a lifelong investment into those organisations. Today's webinar is run as part of the Community Ownership Fund support package. We've provided support to a number of organisations to help them bid for the Community Ownership Fund, which although it's now closed, We're hoping, possibly in the spending announcement tomorrow, there might be continued support for communities to build on the experience of the Community Ownership Fund. We estimate that there's likely over £20 million raised by community organisations in community shares who were also awarded the Community Ownership Fund. We know it was about 19% of awardees who were using community shares as well. So there's going to be an increasing number of organisations who've used community shares who are now in the realm of thinking, well, how do we make the most of this? But community shares are a bit different from other forms of finance. Unlike loans or grants, community shares do have some unique characteristics. Buying share capital also equates to you becoming a member of that society. It is an unregulated form of finance, so there isn't really anywhere to go and complain or grumble, which is why we do encourage people to think carefully and to use community shares carefully when they're doing it, and to use things like our community shares standard mark. The membership can also be a real tangible benefit to the business model. So it can help you with a number of areas, including getting people to be external advocates for your organization, external voices to guide the organization or to tell you what needs there are locally, possibly as potential customers, potential volunteers, future directors. So do consider the wider impact on taking on that membership as well. And that's very different from just taking on a loan or taking on grant finance, which is much more transactional. So why thinking ahead matters. We've got a picture here of the Friends of the Wesley Otley, whose share offer is due to close soon. This is an organisation new start organisation in west of Leeds, looking to take on this Methodist chapel. But why thinking ahead matters. It's important to consider the long term. Governance issues for organisations often have their roots in earlier shortcuts that people take at the time, but can come back to bite them. You'll have raised certain expectations in your community, which you need to try and live up to, but also you want to remain engaged and relevant to the members that you've now taken on. You can think about what future skills and connections and energy the organisation will need over the longer term and the next phase, but also keeping stakeholders confident in your plans and being able to respond to the unknowns that will crop up. Things like resilience planning, really important, being able to think ahead for those scenarios. You'll see on the screen here one example of a governance tool that Cooperatives UK provides, which is our governance wheel. There is also a charity governance code, and there's links to both of these here. These are external tools you can work through in your own time to look at the strengths, gaps within your board and your operations, and it's a good way of pausing and reflecting on how you're operating. I do think succession planning isn't necessarily high on everyone's list. If you've just set up or just concluded a busy share offer raise, it's probably the last thing you want to think about. However, it is important to think about these things as the organisation moves into a different phase of operation. You can think about the skills and experience needed. You can consider how long people might be able to remain involved and to donate their time to drive forward the organisation, particularly if they're key people like treasurers or chairs of the organisation. Developing key contacts outside of your close circle is also important. So people at funders, accountants, solicitors, it's useful to have those that you can draw on every now and then. But you might also consider things like director training, skills audits, to gauge how well you're doing. Peer mentoring and support visits are also tools that we found to be really valuable for people. So often, organisations, particularly new start organisations, are very much in campaign mode. You'll see totalisers, you'll see people desperately trying to push the message out and putting all their energy into raising their share capital and to reaching new members. But usually when you complete the share offer, you're moving from that campaign mode more to a delivery mode. There's that period of excitement and amazement that you've concluded it, to perhaps a slight feeling of dread of, well, now we've got to start delivering this. And particularly, I think that's true if you're a new start organisation. So the work doesn't stop when you've raised the share capital. Really, that's just the start of it. And you do need to bring those new members along with you. Two big areas that we see for organisations. at this stage and in the first few years of post-share offer that they can struggle with. Certainly on the financial side of things, tracking the cash flow as the number of transactions increase and become more complex. Keeping track of those and having a good finance system and a reporting system to the board is vital. These aren't often things that people think about too much in advance and often scramble to then try and set up afterwards. A capital overspend is the most common things we see. Often people might reopen a share offer or seek to take on some additional finance to cover any capital additional costs. We know, building supplies have gone up, inflation has gone up a lot. It can be that your share offer was written 12 months ago and the actual costs of delivering that have gone up significantly since you raised the capital. So managing that can be a struggle. And generally, you've created the financial projections with assumptions in them, but you've tried to make a realistic idea of what you think that's going to look like. But revenue costs don't always work out to be what you thought they might be. Often you might have missed some things, or things might be higher than you anticipate. And income can often either be lower or can be fluctuating a lot more than you might have imagined. So that can cause challenges as well. And then the second big area really is around governance and people. And I think as activities develop, keeping everyone harmonious, even when the energy levels might be dipping, remains an ongoing challenge, working out the responsibilities, the workloads. I think it's inevitable in most organisations that that won't be split equally amongst the board as well. There'll be some people that are driving things forward more than others. So you need to work out, how that's going to work into the longer term. Some common challenges we see at this stage on life post-share offer is, to start with, I think it's worth pointing out the exhaustion of it all. Running a campaign is often the culmination of 12 to 36 months planning of a capital project, but also the share offer and developing the documents and a whole campaign to reach people. At this stage, people can be quite exhausted. And while we see loads of communications pre-share offer and during the share offer, we often don't see that much post-share offer. We might see the excitement of people having raised the share capital. We don't often see that much 3, 6 months down the line of what people are doing with it. And usually that's because people move from a period of being very external facing to internal project delivery, and they sort of drop the ball a bit on communications. It can result in a period of silence. And if we're seeing that as a sort of national body, you can think, how are your members engaging with that? What are they making of that? So there is a challenge as you move from raising the capital to spending it. It often takes more time than you anticipate. You're moving into generally a period of scaling up a business. And when your best laid plans start to hit the reality, that can be when you have less time to attend to members and communications with them, but it does remain important. So the member expectations, you will have spent a huge amount of time getting everyone excited about your project. But now what? You've sold them this vision. You've told them that this is something you're going to deliver. But how do you keep them on side? How do you keep them updated with what's happening? You can check back through your rules and your offer documents to see what people were expecting. Not everyone will obviously have read all of those in great detail, but some might have done. What is important is that the board and the organisation understands those and understands, collectively what that shared vision and delivery plan was intended to be. Some people who bought into the offer may be very relaxed about what your proposition was. They've just bought into the overall vision. Some people who may have put in more than, say, a minimum 50, £100, if they put in thousands of pounds, might actually be watching things more carefully and might be more interested in how that's doing financially in terms of them thinking they're going to get their money back. It's worth keeping in mind things like target interest rates and return of capital. You'll need to consider timescales for an AGM. Sometimes this is the first AGM, so you might not have run one before, and your members won't have attended one before. So it's good to keep people updated on that. But really, your offer document does form the terms and conditions of what you went out to your community with. So it's not unreasonable that they might want to hold you to account to those. You might also have sensed a campaign around reopening a building. Often people will be seeking, say, to buy a pub and reopen it. things inevitably take longer than you think. So it's good to keep people updated on any changes to those timescales as well. So your rules, I think I've said, are they're seldom read, but they will cover lots of areas that are very important to how the organisation should be run, and your members can publicly see your rules. They're all on the mutuals register for everyone to see. But they will cover lots of areas, including shareholdings, any maximum rates of interest, and timescales for withdrawals. For example, the Cooperatives UK rules state that there should be 3 months notice given if you want to withdraw your share capital. So you need to align that with any processes that you have. It also it also gives detail on the order in which withdrawals should be processed. So again, you need to make sure that aligns. The rules will give details around the AGM, including notice periods. So again, the Co-ops UK rules state 14 days notice should be given unless 90% of members want to have one much sooner than that. So there is the option to have one more quickly. So you need to be aware of these. It's worth checking the quorum figures for the number of general meetings. I think people often put those figures together when creating the rules quite quickly without necessarily thinking about it. But the quorum figures are how many members you need to be present at a general meeting for it to be an official meeting. So if that is too high and you can't attract enough people to the meetings, then that can be problematic. And then it will cover things like the appointments of directors. The Co-ops UK rules allow for up to 2 independent non-executive directors to be appointed, who might be appointed on the basis of their skills or experience. Check also things like the retirement cycles, and when people will stand down. So usually at your first AGM, everyone will stand down, and then a percentage would stand down at future AGMs. But it's also worth checking your rules for things like the requirements around accounts and audits. So we have something called the Community Shares Standard Mark, which many of you will be familiar with. This reviews your documentation, your business plan, your offer document, your rules, your application forms against agreed good practice criteria. And that's based on the principles that are there on your screen around proportionality, credibility, good practice, whether it's an open, transparent, simple share offer, whether the information there is clear for everyone to see. You can see those frameworks online and you can have a look at that link afterwards if you do want to trawl through all of that. But if you've used the standard mark, then it will have looked at your plans to make sure that they seem reasonable, that there's sufficient evidence in there to back them up. That's at the point of creating the share offer. Once you've concluded the share offer, really it's over to you to start delivering those. So those plans from thinking this is how it's going to work to actually, well, in reality, this is what's happening. So it's over to you to deliver that. But it is also up to your members really to hold you to account in terms of a governance perspective. That's what they're there for, to, keep your feet to the fire on what you said you were going to deliver. In terms of what is in the Community Shares Standard Mark, from the assessment templates, it checks these non-financial areas, and that includes things like participation in society. So what is it that you're offering in terms of getting members to be involved in what you do? Any changes to the membership? So have you grown as an organisation? If you're an existing organisation, how has that membership varied over the years? It should cover the community purpose, so why you exist, as well as methods for engaging members into the longer term. And it will also cover financial areas. So how is the money going to be used? A really key thing there. What is it you're spending the money on? And how does that impact member interest? That might also include, if you're an existing society that's previously raised community shares, looking at the terms and conditions of the past share offer, they might be on a different interest rate, it might be on a different withdrawal timescales. So how does that impact any past members that you've accumulated? But also clear articulation should be there around your return of capital and any interest rates that you're offering. An example of how that plays out in practice is on your screen here from a recent share offer from Croydon Community Energy. So you can see in their offer document here that they offered that they were seeking to raise 120 to 340,000 pounds investment, and they were offering 5% interest with a maximum individual investment of 30,000 pounds. They were quite clear that they had the aspiration there that it was at 5%. and that all members would be repaid within 15 years. They had certain useful additional caveats and information in their share offer document. So you can see here they talk about paying the interest in cash, not adding it to the share amount that you have. They talk about paying 5% annually, but they do say it's an intention to pay that and that they can only pay it if they can afford to as an organisation, and making clear that it may be lower than the maximum rate of 5%. So we're also, we're always very keen that societies do talk about an interest rate clearly, but talk about it as being an aspiration rather than a promise of we will definitely be able to do this, because it does vary on the performance of the society annually. But what share offer documents won't do is tell you how all this will work in practice. So it tells you what the ambitions and plans are, but they rarely tell you um, how you would apply to receive interest, how you would apply to withdraw. And people often don't think about this until the period when they actually need to start paying the interest and servicing the withdrawals. And often there is a lock-in period where people say they won't pay interest or offer withdrawals for a number of the first few years. So that does provide a period at which people think, well, we don't need to worry about this. We can kick the can down the road, but that soon comes around and you need to have systems and processes in place to handle that. But Croydon Community Energy also have laid out certain non-financial expectations, which I think are also worth bearing in mind. Once you start the delivery of a project, it's good to keep in mind what you promised at the start and how you're going to make the most of having that membership. So they talk about such things as the flow of information, about running workshops, about volunteering opportunities, training programs, about being able to stand for the board. And if those aren't delivered, I think it starts to you start to question, well, are you making the most of your membership there, and are you living up to the expectations that you might have raised when you went out to raise that share capital? I think it's great the societies list all these things, but it really is about delivering those. There's a current another live share offer, which is music venue properties. That's live at the moment, seeking to raise a substantial amount of money to buy music venues. So they lay out here, what is it that investors get? So they talk about ownership, they talk about a level of interest and a vote, but they also talk about things like updates and invitations to launch events. Again, the opportunity to stand to be elected, digital share certificates. So these are all things, commitments that really you're going to have to start to live up to post share offer. And share certificates you might not think about beforehand, but if you've told people you're going to send them out, then you might suddenly need to realize, oh, we need a system to be able to populate these, to create these, and to send them out. So a lot of this comes down to what your vision is when you're planning your community share raise, to then what are the systems you have in place to deliver all of this, and who are the people that you're going to need to operate those systems. Increasingly, many systems are online, but they also need a level of interaction between systems usually. So if you have your membership database in one place, but you need to send an AGM notification out to those membership email addresses, and those email addresses are in a different system and they don't talk to each other, is that going to be a problem? Some poor person is going to have to try and liaise and coordinate all of those. But you might also have people who aren't members, but people who might want to be interested in keeping updated with what you do. So think about segmenting those audiences and different mailing lists as well. And do you have a system in place that can do that? Members also need to know how to interact with you, and how do they know, what procedures are going to exist for withdrawing share capital, or for getting in touch with the society, or for finding out about AGMs. And communications do need to evolve from the Save the Asset campaign that is often the narrative around a community share offer, to the day-to-day delivery of a project. And we do see sometimes people set up websites with lots of maybe a URL that is called Save the Pub, or lots of graphics around Save the Asset and logos that are around Save the Asset. And that does look very dated the minute you've completed the share offer and you suddenly need to start thinking about delivery of the project. So it's worth thinking about that into the longer term. How is this all going to sit together? So there are certain options around member registers and how you do this stuff. Maintaining an up-to-date member register is an ongoing condition of registration for any society. That's quite easy when you just set up a society and you have a very small membership. It can just be a list, can just be a a spreadsheet list or a Word document list. But that starts to grow in complexity as you take on share capital. And you need to keep that updated as well. You can use it to track who your members are. So for AGMs, that's going to be vital as well for communicating with them. Also tracking their financial interests, including how interest and withdrawals interact with that, but also handling complexities of paying interest, adding interest to share balances, etc., and different share offers. So there are different options when it comes to having a membership register or a share registry as it would evolve to become. So if you've used a platform, it's worth checking whether they have a system in place. You might have to pay a fee to continue to use these, but it does take out some of the thoughts that you might need. It does simplify some of these things for you. So FX offer a share registry service. There's a new platform called CoShares run by Repowering London that are starting to do this as well. Sometimes people haven't really thought about this ahead and they have a spreadsheet they might have downloaded from Crowdfunder or from offline donations, and that starts to be the basis of where they start their journey on this. That might be okay if you've got, say, 50 members and a small amount of share capital and a very simple share offer proposition. As it becomes more complex and you take on more share capital through different share offers, it starts to get more complicated. Some people have developed custom databases using things like Civi CRM, but again, that tends to need specialist expertise on people who can customize those databases and create those for you. You could use a dedicated share registry system. So Simon's going to come on in a minute to talk about Air Register, which is something he's piloted and worked with a number of organizations on now. And then there are external share registry services out there. We'll link to a few in our community shares finance guide, but Share Energy are one who can offer the back office service as well. So we have two pieces of online guidance that do provide a lot of information around the post share offer raise part of running a community benefit society that's used community shares. You'll probably be familiar with the community shares handbook. You might have looked at this when you were developing the share offer. You may be less familiar with the community shares finance guide, but this takes the community shares handbook to another level in terms of the requirements and good practice around your finances within the organization. We've got links to the two here, but we'll share these afterwards and you'll be able to see these. But I'm just going to run through a few bits from the finance guide to give you a flavor of what that covers, and you can then look it up all online. So they're freely available online. So it does tell you about the membership register and what the membership register must include and what it may include. So you obviously need the member's name, value of any shareholdings. You don't necessarily need some of the bits on the right-hand side, but it's probably a good idea to include a lot of those as well. So you can work through this to work out, well, what is it we need to track in terms of our member information? And hopefully you've collected most of this at the point of the share raise as well. When it comes to interest, a maximum interest rate should be set out both in your rules as a society, but you should also have set out in your share offer documents what the aspiration on paying a level of interest is. It is common practice for directors then to propose a share interest rate at the AGM. The FCA makes it very clear that you should not be paying more than has been declared as the maximum rate. So even if you have a bonanza year, share interest isn't supposed to be a dividend. It's not supposed to be a distribution of profits. So you shouldn't be increasing the amounts that you pay out. Or if you've had a bad year and then you have a good year the following year, you shouldn't be trying to make up for it. So the FCA has quite clear guidance on all of this. Directors may give members the option to accept a lower rate. So sometimes people do that in share offer documents. You will see various rates. So Bramley Baths did that recently. They offered different rates of interest that investors could take, but you can also offer that after the share raise as well. And a reminder here that interest is not a distribution of profits. We have had some funders question the the use of paying interest, and it is a pre-tax expense, so it is a discretionary cost of capital, and it's payable if the society can afford it. But it's very clearly in guidance from the FCA that it is not a distribution of profits; it is a cost of capital, in the same way that loan finance interest would be. So there are different ways that you can service the commitments you've made on interest payments. So you can credit it to a member's share account. If you do that, that means if someone has invested £100 at 5%, you increase the value of their shareholding to £105. That increases the amount of share capital in the society. So if you work that through to however many shareholders you've got, it's all going to go up by 5%. One benefit is that it improves the liquidity in the short term because it means that you don't have to pay out that cash. So the cash continues to sit within the organization and can help to cash flow the organization, but it does increase the amount of capital you've taken on. So you need to be careful that you're not overcapitalized because you are increasing the liabilities of the amount of share capital that you're setting yourselves up to eventually allow people to be able to withdraw. So the other option is to pay out by bank transfer. In the old days, people would write a series of checks and send them out to members. So that is probably quite a straightforward process in some ways. However, if you have 1,000 members, you can think about the administrative costs of doing that. There's a bit of a trend at the moment to have a lower level of minimum investment in share offers, which is great for getting more people involved in societies. I don't think anyone necessarily thinks beyond the share offer of if we take on an increased number of members rather than a small number of members, that does increase the amount of admin we need to do behind the scenes. So it's worth considering that. You can also pay out the interest in vouchers to be spent within the business. So if you're a cafe, you could issue, say, a £5 voucher to be spent within the business. We recommend that you should put an expiry date on that because technically it shows up on your account as a liability, and you don't want that sitting around forever. And then there's a bit of guidance in the finance guide there on how you account for interest paid. So you should account for it in the financial period in which it is paid out rather than the period in which it is in reference to. And it is considered a movement of equity, so it's not part of the society's expenditure, so it should be accounted for in the statement of changes of equity rather than the revenue accounts. So some technicalities there, which when it comes to having your accountants prepare the annual financial return and the financial accounts, they might be less familiar with how to do this if they're not common with preparing accounts for a community benefit society. So you can point them to this guidance online, which tells you, the technicalities of how to do this. The other big areas are around return of people's investments. So community shares are a community investment rather than a community donation. There's an expectation from the FCA that societies will enable withdrawals of share capital, that it is money that is returned. So community shares aren't transferable. You can't transfer the capital. You can't transfer the shares except on death. The only way that people can get the money back is by asking to withdraw, and that's withdraw at the value that you invested at. And that should be in line with what was indicated in your most recent share offer document. Often people will have a withdrawal suspension period for the first couple of years to allow the society to grow and develop its business operations before you can then withdraw the capital. But you should also retain the right to suspend share capital in due course if the organisation can't afford to pay it. So the FCA does state that a society should only allow withdrawals of shares if it has trading surpluses that match or exceed the value of shares involved. And this has come up in a few standard market assessments where organisations have proposed to return share capital out of effectively cash flow rather than accumulated surpluses. So it is worth checking with your finance people and your accountants, whatever level you're proposing to enable, that aligns with how much trading surpluses that you have accumulated. And the directors believe that the society can afford to pay its debts, taking into account all of its liabilities. So you shouldn't be allowing share capital to be withdrawn from a society if you feel the society isn't in a position to afford it. And then last few bits from me, the finance guide talks about a few policies that would be worth putting in place for societies, and these generally aren't developed pre-share offer. I think people don't have the time to, they often think about it post-share offer, but thinking about a withdrawals policy, making sure that it's consistent with the society's rules and any share offer documentation or public information that you have. Think about if you have a withdrawals policy, how are you going to use it? Where is it that members can access this so they know what the situation is? And make sure that it aligns with any FCA guidance and conditions for allowing share withdrawals. So it should really include the amount that you're able to withdraw on an annual basis and the basis for calculating what is available. So it would be worth looking at how that relates to the profitability of the society. It should have anything about notice periods and checking that those notice periods align with your society rules. Um, how much notice do you need to give to be able to withdraw any of the capital? And then the order and the application process for allocating withdrawals. So is it first come, first serve? Is there a window to do it? How is that going to work? Who has the final say on that? Um, and then as the organization grows, it is prudent to keep aside a growing level of reserves to keep up with the growing income levels of an organization. So it's worth considering the intentions around growth and use of capital. How much money does the organization need to retain rather than return to investors? So other policies that are discussed in the finance guide, you might want to consider things like a liquidity policy, which is around enabling share withdrawals, but in relation to how much working capital you might need, what level of reserves you might need to keep. A retained earnings reserves policy. So effectively, what are you going to do with any money that is surplus at the end of the year? How much do you need to grow the business? How much do you need to service member interests? And then interest rate policy, what are the rates of interest you're going to offer? How will you calculate that? When will you pay that? What are the timescales? What are the methods? And then you are going to need to file annual returns. These must be done within 7 months of the financial year end and returned to the FCA. Members should receive the accounts at the AGM, and that's normally within 6 months of the year end. And the annual accounts need to include figures and narrative. So that's both on the financial information, but also narrative on the community. So what is the community benefit that you've derived, that you've delivered? Who is the community? How have you used any surplus? Are there any potential conflicts of interests? The finance guide also gives quite a lot of information on different technicalities, but also things around audit requirements and at what level you need a full audit and whether you can disapply the audit requirements if you choose to do so at the previous AGM. So it is worth reading through the finance guide if you haven't looked at it already. And then often once people have run a share offer, people start to think about, well, what do we do in future? If we need a small bit of extra investment, or some people have missed out on the share offer timescales, could we reopen that? And Hull Community Pub earlier this year reopened their share offer, their time-bound offer, using existing documentation, but they created an addendum with updates. So once they bought the pub, they went into the pub and they realized they needed more money to refurbish the pub. So they reopened that existing time-bound offer, but with updated financial information. If you are going to do that, especially if you've got the community share standard mark, it's worth speaking with a practitioner and it's worth speaking with whoever conducted your standard mark to make sure they're happy with how you're going to do that and that it doesn't upset any of the existing members that you've taken on. So that is one option. You might consider a further time-bound offer, which is what Stretford have done. So it might be that you close the existing offer, you wait a while, and then you have a new project, as it were, a new campaign to raise subsequent share capital. And we've increasingly seen more and more societies move on to a second time-bound offer, or even a third or a fourth. So we are seeing more examples of people doing that. That does create more complexity of having different timescales of investors and timescales in which you might return their capital or possible different interest rates as well. And then finally, we don't see so many of these, but there's detail in the Community Shares Handbook on how you might move towards an open offer. which is much more like having shares in a normal company where there's an opportunity to, effectively trade your shares. So how you might have an open offer where societies can invite new people to apply generally at any point, but also enable that recycling of capital. So if you want to do that, an open offer is not time limited. It isn't necessarily linked to a specific investment plan. It's more linked to enabling withdrawal of capital and allowing new members to join. So it can be used for further membership and investment to provide liquidity. Initial withdrawal suspension period we recommend in the handbook that should be over. But there are lower thresholds of the information you need to be able to get the community share standard mark for an open offer. So if you are interested in that, we can provide more information. And it is much more about the track record of the society, of where you've come from, rather than what your predictions are on a time-bound offer, which tend to be more when you don't quite know what the future is going to look like, or you haven't previously traded, so it's all a projection. Whereas an open offer allows you the opportunity to go out to your existing members and new members based on the success you've had in the past. So I'm going to pause there and hand over to Simon. So Simon is from Stretford Public Hall, but as I said, also works with a number of other societies and has worked with developed a system to track and manage member share capital. So I'm just going to hand over to Simon to give a bit of an overview of what they've done, how they do it. And then after that, if there are any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A and we'll pick those up as well. Simon.
Yeah, so I'm the current chair at Stretford Public Hall, and I've just got a few slides. I'm just going to basically demonstrate how a lot of what John has said, how some of that hopefully we've tried to put into practice, having done 2 share offers now. And actually, as John mentioned in the last slide, we're moving towards an open offer. But just to give you a bit of context, so Stretford Public Hall, as you can see, is on the picture there. We are a community hub, multi-purpose community hub, and we've been running almost 10 years now after an asset transfer from Stretford Council in 2015. And we actually now have over 40,000 people using the space for a number of different community and cultural uses. And I think it's quite important to flag that actually your share register and member management obviously has to fit alongside your day-to-day operation of your community business and your cooperative. So we're constantly having to balance the day-to-day of running a multi-purpose hub and everything that entails with the fact that we are a community organisation, we're a cooperative, and membership and investment and participation is important to us. But I'll just give you a quick breakdown of our share offer to the team, if John, you don't mind pushing along the slide. So as John said, we now have over 1,000 members, and the majority of our membership has come through 2 distinct share offers that we completed over the last 8 years. So our first share offer was we launched and completed in 2017. And so we raised just over 255,000 from just under 800 predominantly local investors. As part of that share raise, we did secure matched equity from the booster programme. And again, part of our share and membership management is recognising that we've got our community and local investors, and then we've got our kind of institutional investors. And so there are different behaviours and relationships that we have to kind of maintain with our institutional investors, of one being the booster programme, but we also have some local businesses and some other organisations that invest in us alongside our actual community members. But those funds were basically a key part of the funding package to transform our key space in Stretford Public Hall, which is a large Victorian ballroom that is our sort of main space that we use for weddings, parties, music, cinema, everything. So that was really central to our business plan. And we completed the transformation of that space, which ended up being about a £750,000 capital program in 2021. We then undertook a subsequent share offer in 2024, and that was a smaller share offer and raised about 90,000 from 210 investors this time. But again, we were able to secure some match investment from the booster and also Community Shares ICOF, which is another match funder. And that was used for a separate discrete package of critical works to the roof and some energy efficiency improvements. And we actually secured that, acted as match to a community ownership fund grant that we secured in 2024 as well. And then we also have a pool of what we call our non-investor members. So we've always had an ability for local residents and the local community to become members of Stretford Public Hall, which is a community benefit society, through just a £10 lifetime membership, which we hope is an accessible and inclusive way to allow anyone in the community to become a member. Because ultimately, we are a community-owned hub, and we want to make sure that that anyone in Stretford has the opportunity to take part and become a member and feel a sense of ownership of the space. So I'll just go through some of the considerations that we've had to build in for our kind of member and share register management. So I mentioned a key kind of consideration for us is making sure that membership and investment continues to be inclusive and accessible to the local community. We think that's really aligns with our wider aims and objectives of running a community-owned multi-purpose space, but it does create some more complexity in administration and management that we have to kind of resource for. So one, having an ongoing low-cost membership offer and then maintaining a larger member register than we potentially would have if we didn't have a kind of low-cost offer. We've always offered an instalment scheme for our share offer. So if people want to invest in our share offer but haven't got the means to invest the minimum, which in both our share offers, we've had a minimum investment of £100, but we have offered the ability for people to invest in instalments. So our 2024 share offer allowed people to do 10 instalments of £10, which again allowed people to participate, but it required some additional administration on our side. About a third of our investors used the instalment scheme, so it was a really well-used scheme that we think really helped bring maybe some investors that maybe ordinarily wouldn't have been able to participate in the share offer. We offer flexibility on how people can take their interest, so whether they want to take it as a cash receipt, whether it's credited to the share account, or actually they can waive their interest. And John talked a little bit about the kind of policies and processes associated with that. And we have got some policies around withdrawals, but again, we try and have some flexibility on withdrawals to ensure that investors are able to withdraw their investment, say if they're in financial hardship or there's another kind of legitimate reason why they may need to withdraw, that provided it's in line with the policy. So obviously this all kind of means we have to build in policies and processes and systems to facilitate that. That is an investment of time and resources, but there is a kind of, what I'd say is there's a sort of a benefit to us as an organisation, alongside hopefully providing a benefit to our community and our investors, is in that in many ways sort of active management reduces our cost of capital. So we are what I'd say is a relatively marginal business. So we generally set budgets to break even. We are running a number of activities that are are marginal. So actually being able to reduce our cost of capital is really key. And by having kind of an active relationship with our members and investors, we've encouraged members to waive interest if possible. Again, I think because we have regular communication with members, I think that makes people quite invested in us, and I think reduces the level of withdrawals. And I'll go through some of the amount of withdrawals we've had over the last 8 years when I sort of give an insight into our share register. So there is definitely a kind of push-pull that I think is like key to like consider when thinking about active management of your shareholders and your members. But basically, I think a key practical consideration is just recognizing that sort of day-to-day management sort of relies on ensuring effective use of your policies, processes, and then some technology to make everything work. So we've, over a number of years, have codified up, and we now have a share and membership policy, and which covers a lot of what John discussed, and we've really drawn on the finance guide. It's a really helpful resource, so I definitely like recommend using that to help shape those policies. So this has been really helpful because it's given us, it's like an internal reference document for us as a board and our staff, but also informs our members. So it's beneficial to both as an internal document, but also allows our members to understand what the terms and conditions associated with our interest payments, our withdrawals, if people wish to convert their shares to donations, which is another way that we've managed to reduce our cost of capital, share transfer nominations, withdrawal requests and procedures. So that policy has been really fundamental to kind of codifying and having a kind of shared understanding both internally within our team and then externally within members. We've then tried to embed many of those processes into our share register, which, as John mentioned, we use a cloud-based online system using a piece of software called Airtable. And this actually inspired the development of a kind of template which other societies can use called Air Register. I will show you our Air Register in a minute. And that uses the Air Register template, but we've customized it a lot for our purposes. So again, our intention with Air Register was to provide a template that provides some of the kind of what we think are the shared features and functionality that other societies might need around processing interest payments and managing withdrawals. But it's very much a starting model that we that then usually a society will customize for their own purposes. We've that's been available and can be downloaded from the Air Register website, which I'm sure we can put in the chat for those that want to explore that. That's been available for the last couple of years. We are actually creating a new version template that's going to have some additional functionality and improvements based on feedback we've received to date. We then use some additional digital tools just to help us manage some of those processes. So our website has a membership application form, which allows people to become a £10 non-investor member at any time. And that does a lot of the heavy lifting around that process. We use a CRM system called Active Campaign, which it allows us to communicate with members alongside our wider supporters. And we have tried to integrate these systems to ensure what is kind of like the aim goal is to have a single source of truth. So our information on our members and investors is hopefully all relatively accurate. So we have the right email address across our systems and that kind of thing. So again, this has been something that we've like worked on for a number of years, and it's been kind of iterative based on just learning by doing, basically. And I can definitely encourage just like once you start using these systems, you kind of finesse them as you go. So I think that's my last slide on the presentation, but I was going to now just give you just an insight into our share register and a few other additional documents so you can see how we're using it in practice. John, I might ask you to just let me know if you can see this. So apologies, I'm just going to do a seamless takeover of the screen share. John, can you, is a Sherpa document appearing on your screen?
Not yet, I don't think.
Oh, I've got a thumb coming
Got
from
a thumbs
somewhere,
up, so I think that's a yes, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I just thought it'd be useful to give you like the the full life cycle from an initial share offer document to how we've then, following the completion of the share offer document, how we've then implemented that into our share offer. So this was our second share offer document that we actually launched in 2023, but completed in 2024. So as John mentioned, this has all the kind of underlying fundamentals of the share offer. So our targets, we got the standard mark for the share offer, our vision, but crucially, if I scroll down to the end, so basically here is where we documented the terms and conditions of the shares. So as John says, you as a society, you're having to convey what's going to happen to people's investments once it's completed. And obviously, it's really key that once you put that in the offer document, that you feel confident that you can deliver that on an ongoing basis. So everything from transferring shares, purchasing by installments, terms and conditions around withdrawals and interest payments, we've had to kind of embed those commitments into our policies. So again, just to give you an example of our membership policy. So this is our shares and membership policy, which is, I'm just showing you a Google Doc version because again, we're constantly kind of improving this. But again, it covers some of those things that I mentioned around membership, interest payment, share withdrawals, conversion to donations. And then crucially, we have our member register or share register. We kind of interchange those terms because we have both members and non-investor members and investor members. And then, so this is our share register. And again, the Air Register template has a number of these pages sort of embedded. So this is a really useful aspect of having a live cloud-based share offer because we get a live view of our kind of current position. So as you can see, we're actually just shy of 1,000 members. So we should probably not always round up to 1,000, but we're close to 1,000 members. And then we can see our split between individual members, non-investor members, and corporate members or institutional members. We can get a live view of our share capital position. So again, the way that Air Register works is we capture all the different transactions that help us get a current withdrawable share capital position. So I'll just highlight that is our current withdrawable share capital position, and that's based on initial investments that have been made. As you can see, we've had a really low amount of withdrawal, so very small percentage, because again, I think most people are happy to keep their investment in for the long term. We have paid some interest, but as you can see, quite a lot of that has been credited to the share account, which again, less has been paid out as cash. We have encouraged members to if they can, credit to the share account because that reduces our cash, our kind of the amount of cash that's coming out. So it's helpful for our cash flow. We are capturing our non-investor members, and again, you can see the actual interest preferences here. So we've got a large number of people actually waiving interest, and we've actually only got 12 members that are taking interest as cash, and a large proportion of those are taking interest as share capital. So again, this is really helpful to basically give us a good sense of where our share capital and member position is. I was just going to then show you, based on my record as a member and investor, the kind of information that we're able to capture for each of our member investors. So this is my record here. So obviously we have to keep hold of member contact information. Again, that's within FCA guidance about what information you need to have around a member. We keep our nominee details if a person's named a nominee at the point of investing. We have some sort of CRM elements where we can just have tags to know what types of characteristics or traits our members have. But crucially, at the end here, we've got the investment information. And again, because we've done 2 share offers now, we have got this added complexity where we've got members that have got multiple investments, and I'm one of those people. So I've got an investment in our first share offer, which was the ballroom transformation. I've waived my interest for that one. I've invested twice in the second share offer, waived interest in that one. I've only waived interest recently. So this is where previously I was taking interest as credited to share count, and again, our register allows you to track those interest payments and give a kind of live take on where the share account is. So as you can see, I've got a number of transactions that relate to initial investments and then subsequent interest payments. And again, we generally pay 2% interest, again, subject to financial performance and everything that John talked about in the initial part of the webinar. And then we also, again, have the ability, again, this is something that we've built onto the system, the ability to issue share certificates and statements. So again, the system will create these based on the information in the share register. So our share certificates are not that sophisticated, but again, it's like a nice PDF that we can send to people with the information about their investment. Again, we've reduced administration by only sending digital versions. In our first share offer, we did printed ones, and that was a big undertaking. And then we also issue share statements each year so people can get a take on their share capital position based on interest payments. And this is my latest share statement, which just shows the interest payment, the investments I've had, the interest preference, and then the transactions in my current balance. And we create these and email those out to investors following our AGM, which was, we generally have our AGM in November, and then we've issued statements in December. So that's just a view of how our share register allows us to see each individual investor's position. This is the sort of back end of the system where all that information is going in. So I just wanted to sort of show you that the complexity of having best part of 1,000 members is that we've got a lot of information that we have to hold on to. And then I just thought it was helpful to kind of show you those 2 other systems and how they interact. So on our website, we have a membership page, and we have a form that allows people to become a member. Again, it's a minimum £10, and basically this will allow someone to do an online application. We then take that membership application and approve that, and then that goes onto our member register. And so again, it's like making the system speak to each other it's taken time to kind of get all that working. And then just a quick overview of our CRM system, which we use something called Active Campaign. And again, we have lists to be able to allow us to segment some of our supporters. So we have a membership list that allows us to do contact our members. As you can see, some of our members don't have emails, so we do have to do some we have to send out letters to invite some of our members to AGMs because they don't have an email address, but the majority do, so it allows us to be able to contact them. And we do some sort of member-only communications, but most of members are also on our main list, so we'll receive our kind of general newsletters. And again, it's that idea of just keeping people involved, aware of what we're doing. And again, we have really good, I think, general participation in that our members are often our customers coming to our events. So that idea that if you kind of communicate regularly, you kind of get that idea of active management of your members can be really valuable.
Thank you everyone for joining us today, and particularly thank you for Rachel behind the scenes in helping to organise this and run things smoothly, and to Simon for his first-hand experience and expertise, which has been amazing. We will send round these slides afterwards. The recording will go online onto the My Community website as well. If you need any more information, our email addresses are in the chat there. If you're interested in what sort of systems you might need to use, someone like Simon is a great starting point to go to as well, so he could talk you through things like Air Register. So there are lots of options out there. The important thing is that you start planning and you start looking at how you put things in place for the membership that you've acquired. But thank you very much for coming along. I hope you've all found it useful. We do have more webinars in this series and more information on the My Community website as well, so do have a look on there. But for now, it's almost lunchtime, so we'll leave it there. But thank you everyone, and have a good day.
Thanks everyone. Take care.